How much progress have 343 really made on improving Halo Infinite? Nearly a year ago, we saw the now infamous first gameplay reveal for Halo Infinite, notorious now for its subpar graphical fidelity. All the models looked textureless and blocky, every single surface had some shiny finish with no details. The enemies were expressionless and had no details like hair. They were all bald clones. This is what gave us the legendary monkey warrior Craig. This is also when I started giving YouTube a proper go. This is when I started making videos properly. My first video to get some traction was on the very topic of Halo Infinite's graphics. It was mostly speculation as to how the gameplay reveal turned out the way it did. I suspected they were chasing trends, that they were aiming for a more child-friendly aesthetic, taking cues from Fortnite. This, combined with the fact that the gameplay demo was unfinished, led to the widespread lambasting of Halo Infinite. I also speculated of a tumultuous working environment behind the scenes. The game seemed to be in development hell. But how right was I? With the hindsight of a year, what has changed? Where was I proven wrong and right? Just a quick aside, I won't be covering gameplay or multiplayer in this video as I'm waiting for the full reveal tomorrow. Subscribe with notifications on for when that video comes out. Now, first of all, the obvious. The demo was incomplete. This is largely an explanation for why the game looked so bad. A lot of the detail was there, but just wasn't visible due to poor or incomplete lighting. With the departure of several studio leads such as Chris Lee, it's clear that 343 was in development hell for a long time. That's not to mention Parasite. It's obvious that Halo Infinite's original set launch date of 2020 was like a Titanic headed straight for an iceberg. It's good that they changed course. Overall, the visuals were criticized for lack of detail. Everything looked flat and featureless. The glaring color palette was made worse by lack of texture and incomplete lighting. Everything looked like plastic. After further examination, there actually was some detail, but it wasn't visible due to the nature of the lighting. It's actually reminiscent of the broken bump maps in the Gearbox port for Halo Combat Evolved. The detail is there, but you can't see it. Why was the lighting so bad? Well, they used real-time lighting and they didn't simulate light reflecting off objects, meaning some things were lit when they shouldn't be, while for others it was vice versa. It was incomplete because 343 hadn't had time to implement solutions for this, such as ambient occlusion. They also had no baked or static lighting. This is largely fixed now. From what we've seen, just of the technical aspects, the game is markedly improved. I didn't see any pop-in in this open world scene, for example. The objects are lit properly and reflect light where they should. The Chief especially looks way more detailed. This was a part of their plan. It's how they wanted to present the game originally. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that the fan reaction has influenced these visual changes. Like the much dirtier Chief. He's now way more detailed and battle-worn. This is a far cry from even the cinematic trailers, which all showed a clean Chief, even in the original reveal. I think we are having a larger effect on the visuals than we think, and I think it's for the better. Master Chief looks good, but on another point, the assets are mostly the same. Master Chief's model is identical. The only changes, besides some more textures from the 2020 demo, have been system changes, mostly changes to the lighting system. The models and assets look basically the same. The game sounds the same. Is this how much of a difference a bit of polish and advanced technology can make? I predicted that they wouldn't remake all the game assets and rebuild the game, and I was right when I said that, because it's clear that the detail already existed in the models. Now, on another note, what was I getting at with the Fortnite comparison? Well, that referred to the art style. I essentially made the claim that 343 were trying to follow industry trends in basically making the game more palatable for parents of young children. I used the T for teen rating as evidence to support this point. It has been a trend in the industry that some games try to simplify and tone down their violence for a younger, broader audience. Now, I said that the blockier proportions with flat saturated colors was indicative of the Fortnite effect. There were also the opaque effects as well. The plasma grenades looked like blue paint. This is very cartoonish, like Fortnite, but they have toned it down now. The effects look noticeably better and more realistic. There are some exceptions, like the ridiculous shield pop, but the game still has an off look to some people. It still looks a little uncanny? I do still believe that 343 are taking cues from the broader gaming industry and that at some point that included Fortnite. But I now see some other modern games in that art style as well, with the angular blocky geometry, clean pronounced colors, especially reds, and exaggerated character proportions. It makes me think of Halo Wars 2. It also reminds me of XCOM 2, and with a super chunky chief, it started to remind me of Doom Eternal. He basically has the same ridiculous proportions of Doom Guy. There is a certain design language that is popular right now, this not quite World of Warcraft level of exaggeration. It's a very specific style that's popular, and while 343 following trends is dangerous, I think this at least seems thoughtful. It seems like it's a very considered art style. And one thing I'll say is that it's gotten better with each rewatch. It's probably not what everyone was expecting, but I'm starting to get it. It's starting to click. Maybe that's just me deluding myself, but I'm getting used to it. I'm starting to understand their design language. It's also helped me realize how difficult it is to adapt Halo to modern day visuals. They really do have quite a challenge in their hands. Now, what about the environments? I like them as well. They've struck an excellent balance between clean, readable visuals and granular detail. The sheer white walls of the Sergeant Johnson training facility are very reminiscent of old Halo. It feels like a proper multiplayer space. You can clearly see the action over the background. From a distance, the buildings are readable and distinct. Up close, you can see the detail, the ruin and decay on the walls. It's the same with the Forerunner environments. Gone are the days of over-designed buildings with extrusions everywhere and pieces floating around. Now they're simple, readable, obvious geometric shapes, but with heaps of detail up close in the glyphs and ornamentation. A very distinct improvement over the featureless silver cylinders from last year's demo. The level geometry is, again, very reminiscent of Doom Eternal. The visuals on these metal structures is very similar. I would not be even remotely surprised if it was an influence on 343. These are some of the changes that I feel have been made in response to the fan backlash from last year. It was something that was brought up a lot, and now it's clearly something that a lot of effort has been put into. What really excites me is that there seems to be some destructible environments in this sand map. This is really cool, and I'm surprised it's taken us this long to get something of this level in Halo. I'm excited to see just how far they take it. Even if it's largely visual, it's still a good addition to the look of the game to see objects flying everywhere. Speaking of the sand map, I love it. It reminds me of Halo 2, turf, outskirts in the campaign. It's such a classic Halo environment, and possibly hints that parts of the game are on Earth. Possibly. Probably a stretch, but it's worth considering. There's also another place it really reminds me of, and this is another example of influence from the broader industry. That's Dust 2 from Counter-Strike. It seems they're trying to make their own versions of popular maps to really go toe-to-toe with popular free-to-play games. The customization also got me. It seems like you can change everything. I even saw prosthetic arms and legs. They really are going all out. Of course, they have literally every reason to do this. It's free to play. Cosmetics are their source of revenue for the game. It seems as though you can really customize every part of your character's body. One part I'm a little concerned about is how few original armors we saw. It was either reprisals of Bungie armors or better looking versions of armor from Halo 4 and 5. I hope the armor designs aren't too derivative. The Shinobi looked cool, and it's Halo tradition to have the Japanese themed armor, but besides that, a lot of that armor we've seen before. The armor coatings look decent, but we still don't know how they work or how bad the system for them will be. I also have to wonder what effect no red and blue will have on gameplay. Classic Halo is notable because of its lack of screen clutter. Screen clutter was an issue with the hit markers in Halo 4 and 5, and if we have to rely on silhouettes to tell friend from foe, the screen clutter is only going to get worse. One also has to wonder what the effect will be on custom games. I'm still somewhat concerned. They also haven't revealed anything about monetization. On a final note on the customization, was this a spray? Surely 343 has taken some cues from the most popular free-to-play shooter on PC that isn't Chinese spyware. I would not be remotely surprised if Halo Infinite included unlockable sprays. It's clear that 343 has been using motion capture for their face models. That isn't news, it's common in games now. What is notable is just how expressive Clone Tana, and I'm not calling her the weapon, she's Clone Tana to me, looks in this cutscene. You see all these details in this facial model and all this movement. Some even say it's over-expressive. People have pointed out just how odd her mouth movements look. Her lips move in an odd way, it's just a little uncanny. It's like when you turn up all the movement and animation values by 2 times in Halo 4. I'm no expert on mocap and animation, but I think they could tune it down slightly. I also like the design as well. The classic Cortana was criticized, by non-Halo players mostly, for being too sexual. Even though it showed nothing explicit, the hologram was too reminiscent of nudity. I think this is why they gave Cortana armor in Halo 5. That, plus they wanted to oppress gamers. But here's the thing, fan service sells. It always does well. Just look at how well the same generic weeb anime games sell time after time. So they retained the clothing, a UNSC uniform this time, but they struck a balance, creating a fairly attractive new facial model for the AI. It's also pretty good for reaction images, I feel. Although this video is about graphics, I'll touch briefly on the music. In short, it's good. It's phenomenal. The composers are insanely talented and what they've written so far is brilliant. I have no doubt that the soundtrack will be awesome. I do have a concern though, like the armor, what we've heard so far has seemed too derivative. Basically just note for note retellings of Halo themes in some cases. Now, don't get me wrong, I love that they sound like Halo and fit in as Halo themes. But I feel like they overcorrected from Halo 4 and 5, where they had very little in common and were a thematic departure from the original games. What I want is more tracks like Reverie, original compositions that are evocative of Halo. I also want them to consult with Marty, but I know that can't happen. Once you've committed the crime of disagreeing with a Reddit mod, no punishment is too great. The cabal of Reddit moderators truly exercise a vice-like grip on every industry in the world. Ultimately, I've been too positive this video. Now I have to make sure I tear into Halo Infinite next video. I don't want to give the impression that there's nothing wrong. In short, yes, Halo Infinite has drastically improved since the demo of last year. Although, probably not in exactly the way most of the general public were expecting. Either way, we can only hope for the best. If you are a Chad, subscribe and turn on notifications, as well as liking. This is Shredded Nerd saying goodbye to the Nerd Army.
Sweaty? I just spent 3 hours combing through all of your Reddit comments from the past 2 years, and oof, that's a yikes from me.